Combining calisthenics and weight training to build toward insane feats of strength and skill while also getting the benefit of weight training to build your best possible aesthetics. I'm obviously heavily biased, but I truly believe this is without a doubt the most enjoyable and even optimal way of training. You're getting the benefit of unlocking skills, moving through progressions, and getting the fun and motivation of working towards some of those advanced skills while also having the benefit of targeting muscle groups, building aesthetics, and building lean muscle in the areas that you really wanted to target with the weight training. And I really do think as well, for a beginner and intermediate level of calisthenics, this is probably the most beneficial way of training, as the two definitely complement each other. This is something that I've followed for the first 4 years of my calisthenics journey, and I've coached a lot of people through those beginner and intermediate stages following this hybrid path and seen some incredible results. However, it is very easy to get wrong, and you can very much bottleneck and slow down your progress, both from a strength and aesthetics point of view. So making sure you're following along with these 5 crucial tips if you're going to go down this hybrid calisthenics path. And I highly do recommend doing it, as you get a lot of results, but it is also very enjoyable. So let's get stuck into it. So we're in the home gym setup. We're going to walk through a bit of a beginner hybrid program, and obviously as I'm going through the program, we'll talk about those 5 crucial tips that you 100% need to make sure that you follow if you are going to down this hybrid path. All right, so we're starting with probably the most common question that they get asked all the time, and what is the best training split for calisthenics and weight training? And what I highly recommend doing, the training split's going to obviously vary for each person, but what I recommend doing is not having dedicated calisthenics days and dedicated weight training days. Do your best to combine the two into one session. The reason being is frequency. We want to be training those calisthenic skills as frequently as we possibly can for the most part. And if we're only having 2 dedicated calisthenics days and 1 or 2 dedicated weight training days, more or less, it's still not giving us enough frequency of hitting those calisthenic skills. So the best part about doing it, combining the two, then we're hitting calisthenics 4 days a week and also hitting weights 4 days a week. So we're getting so much more frequency for both the calisthenics and the weight training. And if you're saying that, okay, that works for some people, but I'd rather go to the gym twice a week and then also train at home for 3 days a week, so it works out a little bit better, and that's totally fine. I completely understand that. What you can do is obviously still continue with your 2 or 3 days that you train at home or at the park, but when you go to the gym and you do your 1 or 2 gym sessions, have your first exercise, your hardest calisthenics exercise that you want to try and do and level up, and try and make a focus on that, doing it first, and then you can continue with your weight training session. So that way you're still getting in that extra frequency of hitting that key calisthenics skill. And probably the most important part of combining the two, you have to make sure that you're doing those calisthenics skills first. For the weight training, yes, it's still going to be strength focused, but we have a lot of stability, everything's under control, and the technical side of it isn't as intense. Whereas with calisthenics, it's very motor control, meaning that we need a lot of technique, our nervous system's firing, and it's super strength focused. We need a lot of control and obviously a lot of strength, as I said. So making sure you're as fresh as possible for those calisthenic skills, and then finishing your session with weight. Which leads me to the second point actually, and that is exercise selection. So it is so incredibly important to make sure that you're not trying to focus on 10 different calisthenic skills in the same week. You want to really try and pick 1 to 2 push and 1 to 2 pull skills across your training week. And then obviously making sure, as I said, you're hitting them a few times a week. In terms of your one session, what I generally recommend doing is doing 2 to 3 calisthenics focused skills and then 2 to 3 weight training focused exercises. So for me here, the first exercise, probably the most difficult for most people and probably the most important in terms of pull, is building up our pull-ups. So I could be doing band assisted pull-ups, making it super strength focused. And then I may move into some inverted rows and then some hanging leg raises, and then finish off with the weight training stuff. In terms of the weight training though, here it's going to depend really if you want to focus more on building muscle and aesthetics, or if you're doing weight training to also complement building your calisthenics. And from there, it's going to change in terms of what exercises you'll do. If you're really trying to use the weights to complement building your calisthenic strength, then you may be hitting similar movement patterns. So I'll go from a pull-up and then I'll go into a lat pull down as well to complement each other. However, if I'm trying to build muscle more and hit lacking areas that don't get hit as much with calisthenics, I may go from pull-ups into a single arm cable row that's very lat focused. As when I'm doing pull-ups, it's actually a little bit more upper back focused. Surprisingly, it's actually not as much of a lat movement as a lot of people think. Chin-ups are probably a little bit more lat, pull-ups are actually a little bit more kind of rear delt and trap. And if I'm going to focus a little bit more on hitting lacking areas, then I would maybe go from doing pike push-ups, so all these shoulder movements and some planche lean variations that obviously hit shoulders, and then I could maybe go to hitting a dumbbell chest press, as I want to hit a little bit more on my chest with a push exercise. So there's ways to manipulate just depending on your goals. So we can use weights to complement the calisthenics, or we can use weight to complement hitting muscle groups and lacking areas that we're really trying to build up in terms of our aesthetics. So have a think about that. So the third tip is knowing the difference between training for strength and then training for size. Because obviously when we're doing our calisthenics stuff, we're really obviously wanting to focus on building strength. But then we're doing our weight training stuff, for the most part, we may be wanting to focus on a little bit more on building size and conditioning. So rep ranges, rest time, and exercise selection is so incredibly important here. And even actually the intensity that you actually do each set too is also important.
So in terms of intensity for building strength, you'd actually be surprised here, but you're better off not going to complete failure when you're training those key skills. And the reason that is from purely just a building strength perspective, and there's actually a lot of research on this as well. You get more strength adaptations when you do not go to complete failure. And not only do we get more strength gains, but we can actually get more sets and more volume in across the actual session and the training week. And we're also reducing injury risk too. So it's literally a win-win-win when we do not go to complete failure. I think every now and then going to complete max effort sets shows where you're at. And it may be beneficial. However, if all of your sets are like that, you're completely compromising your progress. So definitely try and train at a high intensity, but stop just shy of failure. So keep it relatively close, but try not to go to complete failure. Really focus on form. Rest times as well. For most of it, you're generally going to want to be resting as much as you practically can. For your weight stuff, you can get away with doing 1 to 2 minutes of rest. If you can go over that, even better. However, if you're doing your strength focused stuff, have to make sure that you're resting at the least 3 minutes between each set. You want to be as fresh as absolute possible to make sure you can do it with correct form, but also do it at that high intensity, which you're obviously trying to focus on. And lastly, most important part of building strength is obviously rep ranges. If you're doing over those 10 reps and doing high rep stuff, sure, you might be building some conditioning and you're still getting better at form and building some muscle, but you're not building strength. That's why I hate when creators say you need to get to 25 pull-ups before you can start doing skills. Absolutely ridiculous. You do not want to be doing things well over 10 reps a whole lot. In terms of building your strength, focusing on that 1 to 6 rep range, anywhere between there is so incredibly important. And obviously in terms of those holds, when you're doing more of your holds, somewhere around a 3 to 10 second hold range is probably going to be best. Doesn't mean you don't go over that rep range. I think there's benefit to doing some of your session in those higher reps to build that conditioning. However, for the most part, especially at the start of your session, get into those low rep ranges and really focus on building that strength. And then in terms of the weight training stuff, if your goal is to build muscle, anywhere between 5 and 30 is going to see similar results, as long as it's pushed relatively close to failure. But I'd be going a little bit closer to failure with your weight training. You can go in a little bit higher intensity. We can do less sets that way as well, which is easier. But what I probably recommend doing is somewhere in that 5 to 10 rep range. That way we're still building strength, because we're still in those somewhat lower rep ranges, but we're still optimizing, obviously building that muscle and that conditioning too. So for your weight training stuff, 5 to 10 is really good. You can go a little bit over if you prefer that and you want to get like a really solid muscle pump. But then your calisthenics, try and keep most of it in that 1 to 6 rep range, or the 3 to 10 second holds for those isometric hold stuff. Tip 4, let's get into it. You can see here in this session, what I've done so far is pull-ups. I've gone into a hold exercise that's obviously quite difficult, so a front lever variation. And now we're going back to some push, as I don't think you have to only go pull push in terms of your sessions. You can do both for sure. And now we're going to do some pike press variations, so some push-up stuff. And what this is really good for in pike push-ups is obviously building toward handstands, which is that 4th point. So when should you train your handstands? I get this asked all the time as well. Do you train it in your sessions? Do you do it after? Do you do it before?
Do you grease the groove? Do you train it outside of the sessions? What is the best way to go about it? And I really do think it probably more or less depends on your schedule, but there is a best way to go about it. And there's things that you definitely do not do. Firstly, what you shouldn't be doing is holding handstands or doing your handstand practice during or after your session. And that is simply because we want to be super fresh when we do train handstands, as it's very skill focused and we need all of that kind of our brain firing and limited fatigue to actually perform it. So during the session or after a session is probably the biggest no. But what is going to be best is doing it outside of your sessions completely. What I get clients to do is greasing the groove or trying to get 20 minutes of practice in as many days of the week as possible outside of the sessions. Even 10 minutes of practice is totally fine as well. It's the same as learning a language or any other skill. If you do one big session a week of handstands, but you don't train handstands outside of that, you're not gonna get too much out of it. And I really do think this actually fits better in a lot of people's schedules as they form a habit around it when they're watching TV at night. They get some handstands done, or whenever they brush their teeth, they do 5 minutes of handstands always after that. And hopefully for a lot of you, that's twice a day. So you're getting in that kind of habit stacking of brushing your teeth and then doing handstands or anything else that works well for you. However, if you'd rather have structured workout plans, just try and make sure that you're doing it multiple times a week. But if you're getting in only 2 big 1-hour sessions a week, yes, you're getting 2 hours in total, but technically toward the end of the session, you're going to be under so much fatigue, so you're not going to facilitate a lot of learning that way. If you get 2 hours across the week over 2 sessions compared to 2 hours a week across 12 sessions of 10 minutes, you get so much more out of the same amount of time put into it. And to be honest with you, 10-minute sessions 12 times a week doesn't feel like a whole lot when you're just doing it twice a day and you're just doing it quickly in the morning and quickly in the afternoon once you get home. That is a lot, 12 minutes to 10 minutes. I'm not saying you have to do that. You can definitely start off at 5 days a week of 10 to 20 minutes of practice and still see some awesome results. But I really do think going about it that way is so much more smarter. Or what you can do, and I do get clients doing this, is when they're training 4 days a week or 5 days a week, they do about 15 minutes of practice in their warm-up, just not at the end of the session. What works for me, I was actually during COVID, so I was learning the handstand during there, so obviously had a lot more time. But what worked really well for me is I would be playing COD, so Call of Duty, and whenever I died, which was a lot because I sucked, I would just do handstand practice for a couple of minutes, and I use that as a bit of a, I use that as my kind of cue to get handstand practice in. And honestly, I got the handstand within probably a month, which is pretty crazy, but I had all the time in the world, so it's a little bit different. But I'm telling you guys, greasing the groove or short sessions multiple times a week, best thing for you without a doubt. So the 5th point, and this one probably touches on a fair few areas, it's probably the 5th and the 6th and the 7th point, but you need to make sure that you don't go into the same mindset that you've had with your weight training with your calisthenics training. So I think a lot of people that come from that gym background, they go into their calisthenics with a lot of intensity and they want to smash it and put on that no pain, no gain mentality, but it's probably the worst thing you can do from a calisthenics perspective. When we do our weight training stuff, sure, we want to train at a super high intensity. We want to kind of really fatigue our muscles, and we can get away with probably poor form or at the least just going max out effort, because a lot of exercises have a lot of stability and a machine base, so it's kind of hard to get wrong. And we're also probably a little bit more experienced too, so we can get away with a bit more intensity. But for calisthenics, you have to make sure that you leave your ego at the door and your focus is on building strength with the correct technique first. So incredibly important. Probably the most common thing that I see wrong with a lot of gym goers is having that mentality, and it completely stuffs them up. And I can tell you from experience, because that is exactly what happened to me. I built up my planche super quick. I was quite strong with it. I built up to a straddle planche almost in like my first year, but my form was horrific. And what I had to do was completely regress it back down to pretty much below a tuck planche and build up my strength again under the right technique. So I pretty much didn't train planche for a good part of 2 or 3 years just because it haunted me having to regress back so much. So please make sure you're getting the right technique analysis and the right tutorials, and having someone who's experienced in calisthenics just slightly look over your form. I have a completely free community. You get coaching support there, and there's also masterclasses on technique. So by all means, have a look over that. As I said, it's completely free. You can join. There's other coaches in there. It's not just me. So there's also all the community as well. But just please try and remove your ego and just focus on the technique side of it. You can definitely push yourself, don't get me wrong, but just make sure you have that form right correctly first. So key takeaway, just honestly, just try to enjoy it. Smash the weight training, make the calisthenics super strength focused, and to be honest with you, you'll start seeing results very quickly. If you need more calisthenics advice, chuck a subscribe, follow on Instagram, all the rest of it, and I'll see you in the community.